Okay, according to the Apple, it is 8:30, so might as well get going. How many of you have been to one of my presentations before? Because it looks like a lot of new faces. Okay, so that's good. For me, if you have any questions, blurt them out, whether they seem really, really simple or really complex. The toughest part with talking about technology is there are people in the room who some of this is brand new, and there are other people saying, I do this all the time, and stop talking underneath me. So any questions you have, please shout them out at any time, and I will do my best to fake an answer that is satisfactory for you. This is my information. If you hit the QR code, you can download my V-card. I did want to point out there that we also, this Church Next Online, Adam Countryman and Leah and I started this in COVID as churches were trying to figure out streaming and navigating COVID, and are we reopening, are we not reopening? And there's a bunch of webinars that we put up there. So if you go to churchnext.online, and it's funny because I was getting ready for this presentation, I said, what was that URL? And we were going gangbusters, like every week we're putting out something, and so I looked up the URL and realized it had been expired for a year, so we haven't really kept it up that much, but the stuff that we did in COVID is up there. So I was just going through and I was looking up pictures, and I was looking at March 2020. And a little bit of background about me is we have a company, Inspire Media Productions, and we do a lot of AV for churches, but also for just regular production stuff. And in 2020 was our 20th year in business, and we were ready to go, and we had just donated this $25,000 event to Lincoln Planners, and took 80 to 150 lights out there and lit this whole thing, and we had all of our 20th year in business. Our logo had been redone. We had all this swag ready to go. Did this big event, and then 4 days later, everything. So I am still trying to get rid of tons of 20th anniversary swag that we've got. The whole year was decimated. So for us, we lost 100% of our business when COVID happened because we were all live events. And that happened on March 12th. Somewhere I have a screenshot. I knew it was coming, so I took a screenshot of our calendar, and it was all orange, filled with events. And by the end of that week, it was completely empty. So we had to let a few guys go. But then 2 days later, we had a virtual studio built, and we were like, let's do virtual events. And I'm calling all the clients saying, I know you canceled yours, but let's try and do this virtually. So that's kind of how we were ready to go. And then at Christ Lincoln, we had one campus that already was doing 3 camera shoots just for recording and for ImageMag. So theirs was pretty easy. We can just put in an encoder and go streaming. But then the 2 other venues, the traditional venue had nothing. In the other campus, we had just opened 5 months earlier, and it was going like crazy. It had grown by 200 people. It started at 300. We were at 500. What are we going to do? And then all came crashing down. But we had to get online really quickly. So this was kind of our war room we built. And we had all this gear, and since all of our events had just gone away, we put all this in the church, put a couple cameras in Sanctuary, got some encoders, started going on live stream. We were ready to go that weekend. But then over time, it was like, this isn't really sustainable. I said, I can't just have this sitting here forever. And I was all about flatten the curve, let's do it. My daughter and wife were on a tour with Concordia Seward. I'm like, come back, just wear the mask, 2 weeks, we'll be through this, no big deal. And then, as you know, it became pretty apparent we're in this for the long haul. And then we had to start asking some of the questions we're going to talk about today about what are we doing long term. So here's topics to discuss today. And I won't spend a lot of time on all of these, but I think we can lay some groundwork here. So defining our ministry, online ministry and audience, what level of production do you want? It has been amazing for me to see how creative churches have been with getting online. From it's an iPhone going to Facebook Live, to it's the pastor sitting in the bedroom doing a Bible study, to one of the churches in town also had multiple cameras and they're doing post-production all through the week, and it's so refined and so good, and everything was multi-tracked and sent to a studio where they mix it down, and that was not sustainable at all. So there was a downfall for that. Where are you going to stream? So we'll talk about that a little bit. What video equipment do you need? How do you get good audio? Because that's a big question even still. What people do you need? And then how do we tie this all together? So defining your online ministry, we had to deal with this a little bit when we were saying, okay, now, because when COVID started, there was no church. So it was easy. You're online. That is your ministry. You gotta make this work. But then, as in every virtual audience, virtual congregant, whatever you want to say, they were your only audience because you were just talking to a camera and you were talking right to them. And for the first time, Pastor was talking to me the whole time. And our numbers were crazy. We were like 2,000 a weekend or more. We're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then I think a little bit when, after Easter, I think everybody kind of had a dip after that. People were like, all right, we got through Easter. But then when we started bringing people back live into the room, all of a sudden they weren't necessarily our serious audience. They were kind of a fly on the wall watching us worship. We had to talk about that a lot. Like, what does that look like now when Pastor isn't just staring at the cameras? Now he's talking to other people. And the virtual audience are watching us take communion. But they're not taking communion, So that's a discussion that you need to have. Are there things you need to change for the online audience? So make sure you're welcoming them. But when you say, okay, so after the service, there's cookies out in the lobby, we're going to get together and talk about X, Y, Z. Well, I'm not, because I'm still at home in my pajamas. So you're not talking to me. Here's different announcements maybe for people that are online compared to the people who are coming to church. So do we need to have a different announcement reel for them? Do we need a host who's talking to them before and after the service? And when we cut to where we're doing communion, what's the online audience doing? Are they just watching us take communion? So we talked about this, like, well, no, we really need to have another camera set up then, that camera goes and a person talks to them and does announcements that are for them. And now we need this big crew, and now we need cameras all over the place. And it's like, oh my goodness, we didn't plan on doing an online church forever. So is that how far we want to go? And that decision felt kind of rushed. And then is your online community Sunday mornings only? All of a sudden we're streaming, but what are we doing about Bible studies and what's all of our content? I know St. Lawrence and Frankenmuth, they've been doing video for 30 years. I think someone told me when COVID hit they had 2,000 pieces of content just ready to go online. And we had like virtually nothing. I mean, confirmation had been online, but not Bible studies in church.
I cut a lot of old services, hymns.
Anything I got, pump out content. So we have been talking now about moving forward. Do we start intentionally creating more video content? So should this happen again? Or just the church's survivability in America? Like I know a lot of churches are already planning for if they shut us down for some reason, video content may be what we want to have for sustainability. So should we be starting to record that stuff or transition things to a video type ministry? All right, so level of production. In this, I don't have, for me it doesn't really, I'm not saying it doesn't make a difference because there's one I like high level of production, but people have been very successful in any level here. So it could just be one camera, and there are a lot of churches still. We set an iPhone up on a tripod, sitting in the middle of the room, everybody knows it's there, and it goes to Facebook or YouTube. Easy, cheap, maybe not the best experience for people online. For I'd say the first 6 to 8 months, they held on because that's fine. We understand you're struggling. 2 years into it, people are probably tired of that. And I remember David called me one day. He says, we have to up our production because now people are looking at every church in town, and the church that's really got this dialed in, they're going to start going there. And then when we come back live, now they're a part of that congregation just because of their production value. And I hadn't really thought about that. I'm like, wow, that's people just weren't ready for that. Intermediate. You've got some multiple cameras, a video switcher. Take the audio from your soundboard, plug it into your switcher. We've got better than the one camera thing. And then advanced. So again, multiple cameras, a switcher, tally lights, communication systems. We can talk to our camera people. The tally lights are so that the camera guys know when they're on, and the pastor knows which camera's live, so he knows which camera to look at. There's a broadcast audio mix. Maybe there's some more advanced graphics with all of the lyrics are on the screen, keyed underneath of the camera shots. So now we're trying to get closer to what we might see on TV. Okay. And then inside all of those, there's price ranges for everything. This is something just with planning. We shouldn't be surprised by what goes right. We should be surprised by what goes wrong. I know people are like, wow, I am amazed that worked. Well, you should have planned for it to work. You should be surprised when something went bad because you thought all this stuff through. And this is something I'm guessing I stole from Jeff, but there are the known knowns, the things that you know. I know how the service is going to go, basically. I know I have 3 cameras. I know I have a switcher. There are the known unknowns, like I don't know who's running audio today. I don't know if we have a person or not. I don't know if the internet is going to be strong enough this weekend. Then there's the unknown unknowns, and that is like I came in here today and the HDMI cable didn't work, and I'd planned on working on some sites. The HDMI cable didn't work. I'd never used a speaker before. Apparently it's a transformer you have to take apart and put together again. Those are things I thought that I knew them. I really didn't. And the unknown unknowns, those are really the only things I can possibly leave for Sunday morning. And those can kill you, like all the power went out. I mean, there's nothing I can do about it, The internet connection's not bad. Well, our internet's been bad here for 5 years. Well, now you're streaming. You can do something about that, Maybe you need to have redundancy. We had an event we were doing for the Nebraska district, and I'm counting down to live. It was wasn't a convention, but some teachers' conference. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Every computer, no internet, no internet, no internet. They all just start dropping like flies. I'm like, oh my goodness. The next day, we brought in another dedicated fiber optic service just for the streaming computer. That's it. No switches in between. So if that stuff happens, you need to kind of do your due diligence for how do we fix this. Or I've never used this encoder or this switcher before, and I didn't know what that button would do, and it sent everything to black. Figure that stuff out beforehand. Okay, so where are you going to stream? How many of you are streaming to Facebook? Is that your only platform? How many is your only platform?
Well,
Your only platform.
it also goes to
Okay. How many of you are just YouTube? Okay. Vimeo? Vimeo live stream? Okay. How many of you are streaming to some other service and then embedding it or Church Online or something? Okay. Have any of you had problems with Facebook and YouTube specifically?
Yes.
Okay.
We tried going straight to, encoding straight to YouTube, and we just didn't have, I'm guessing, a computer powerful enough for it.
Oh, interesting.
It would drop off, it wouldn't go through, the quality was all messed up.
Right.
We just had a horrible time.
Yeah. So are you still doing it? You fixed it?
No, we've given up on direct to YouTube, so we
Yeah.
actually do a free conference call, which is kind of like a Zoom.
Oh, interesting.
And we take that recording and then we process it on iMovie and put it on YouTube after the fact.
Oh, okay. Good. Any other Facebook, YouTube horror stories?
Cut your feed if you plug copyright material.
Copyright material?
We use an encoder to go straight to YouTube, like a separate app outside of a computer. And they early on in COVID, every month or two, they would change
Your key? Yeah.
and no one else knew how. And I was, coming up to speed on the system, but no one knew how to change it.
You're right.
We pushed the button to start streaming on Sunday morning, and
Doesn't work.
red light.
Facebook did that one weekend. Remember they redid everybody's keys? And yeah. I'll just say, these guys don't care about your church service at all. It is a free service. You're not going to call them. You're not going to get support from them. They don't care. They don't want your content there anyway, right? So I'm surprised people are still doing this. I know it's an affordability thing, and
Why do you say they don't want your content?
Well, I think that there's anybody who's doing it for free. What do they care if you're broadcasting your church service? Like, they're not making money off of you, really. You're not monetizing it necessarily. So you're a church. I wouldn't say that Facebook and YouTube are really all for church ministry, and you're a free service. So if there's a problem, I've never seen YouTube jump through hoops or Facebook to try and make sure that you're ready to go and you're 100%. Whereas other companies are going to try and guarantee you some level of service. And that
Is there levels of stream quality within YouTube?
someone's going to have to answer that better than me.
Depends on the system that you're sending. If you have a low grade.
But they don't have like a premium that you can pay and get any type of advanced service. Yeah.
We've had trouble. We were doing it directly through the website, through YouTube's website,
Mm-hmm.
and felt a throttling down of bitrate quality. Or
Yeah.
something like that. And
Yep.
it was really frustrating. And since we switched over to OBS, it was a little bit.
Okay. Instead of their built-in encoder, the YouTube built-in encoder. Yeah. Yeah.
We're struggling with the most is the audio quality. So
Okay.
making it to the end user.
Yeah, because Facebook compresses the heck out of everything. And Facebook, up until recently, was only doing 720. So you produce this great stuff at 1080, and then they squash it down. So I understand the whole, it notifies everybody, and it's church time, and I can jump on there and watch it really easily. But it seems to me there's a lot of other frustrations around that. And what do you do? Other than say, it's YouTube, it's free, it's fake, what can I do about it? Vimeo, we started with Vimeo because Vimeo, I had a bunch of live stream accounts and Vimeo and Livestream had merged. But then Vimeo early on had some major crash and burns on Sunday mornings, and it just became like they are not ready for this. Nobody was ready for this. If I'd known on March 1st to buy stock in Zoom, that would have been great. I can't imagine how Zoom went from, some businesses use it, to every school kid in the world is using Zoom. I can't imagine how they could scale that. How many embed it directly into your websites? People go to your website and it's there. Okay, great. And are you using YouTube or something to do that embed? Or?
Yeah.
Okay, Vimeo. Okay. How many of you use it in Church Online as kind of a wrapper? For those of you who aren't familiar, Church Online is just like this free, I'll call it a wrapper for your live stream, and it has some chat functions, and it has a lot of stuff like giving functions and prayer requests and stuff like that. And it's just kind of nice little portal to set up. Has tools for hosts and participants, and so that's a free thing if you want to take a look at it. And then we thought, how do you archive your services? Are we keeping these forever? Are we recording them locally, or are we just recording them online? Because then if there's a hiccup online and that's our only recording, then So maybe think a little bit about, are we saving these forever? Yeah, go ahead.
Have you ever done, I don't know what church you're with or anything, but done any statistical analysis of how many people only tune in live versus whoever checks on things, uses old content?
Yep.
So I'm under the impression it's not a lot of people are going to go back to 3 weeks ago Sunday and watch it.
No, I don't think they'll go back to 3 weeks ago Sunday and watch it, not a lot. But do I have that historical stuff that if something happens, I have that content that I could repost again?
What would be the circumstance that you'd repost it?
COVID 2025, and we weren't ready, and we need a whole bunch of content, and I have those sermons recorded. I could chop them up and turn them into webcasts during the week or something. Just for there's things that we use recordings to just go back and say, what did we do that week? Oh yeah, this is what happened. We were talking about when COVID first happened. Do we have a bunch of songs recorded that we could pull to kind of make some services? So now we're more set up for it. But I bet we've got DVDs from 2004. We've just always recorded every service, so we can go back and see what we did or what happened that weekend. Yeah.
You mentioned Facebook compressing audio. Are there services, like we use Restream to push to Facebook and YouTube. Are there services that kind of manage that compression, or that don't?
There are better. See, we use Boxcast. We've probably been using not regular, but I think my first time using Boxcast was probably 6 years ago, and they have been ridiculously reliable. So I do a hardware encoder, I send a Boxcast, and they just take what you have, and they will re-encode it, so it takes a little while. But so with Livestream.com, your encoder had to decide, I want an HD stream, I want a 720, I want a 480, and I want a 320, and you had to encode all that and send all those streams up. What I like about Boxcast is you send it your best 1080 and then it does the re-encoding and creates all those different ones for you. It's laggy. It's about 45 seconds behind. Things like Boxcast Now and Resi, what they can do is buffer. So if you lose your internet for like up to a minute or two, it's buffering. Then it'll keep sending it out so that, Resi says we guarantee unless you lose your internet for a long time, you will not have downtime. You're 2 minutes behind, because it's buffering. But some of those services, they're not going to do as much with trying to get that as thin as possible because you're paying for it. They have
I'd actually been asking about audio compression, like the plugin compression.
So you mean from our side, for us to compress it?
I'm not talking about the bitrate compression as much as I'm talking about the audio level.
Yeah.
The live dynamic.
I haven't, that's in your encoder, typically more than on the other side. What were you thinking back here?
I haven't found anything that really non-concept.
Yeah, but I know that Facebook and YouTube compress the heck out of it. What I can say is the other services tend to just, whatever you're sending it, it'll go.
Everyone's talking about
Yeah.
Getting back to the question that this gentleman asked over here, the thing that we've found very helpful about keeping our services up, even though we don't encourage, people don't go back and watch it again with worship, is that, like right now, we're in the process of hiring a music director, another music director, and so we can tell that person, go check out our YouTube videos and look at the services and see what we're doing. Just because you're not using it for worship, to be able to still have them up for archival purposes for that type of a reason.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm the same. I keep historical records every single week of how many people watch live, how many people watch after the fact, and we have encouraged people to set their own Sabbath. So Sabbath doesn't have to be on Sunday. If your family is going to watch church on Wednesday night, awesome. So at the 2-week mark, I go and take a historical look back of what it is, and we'll have 150 live views. And we'll have 75 views after the fact, people watching that and during the week.
And that's probably a good timeline. Like after 2 weeks, people probably aren't going back. You're into another service, but especially on Sunday and Monday and Tuesday, probably up to Wednesday, you're probably going to get some more, and that's just going to trail off after that.
And I would say as well, so we look at when in the video do people drop off. It's typically people are going back to listen to the sermon. So we can't see whether they scrubbed through to get to the sermon, but they're dropping
That's
off.
when they're done.
They're dropping off after the sermon if they're watching it after the fact. Some of them are if they're tracking it in live time, but
Right.
I would just echo that of why it would be important to have it archived somewhere for people looking
Yeah.
after.
Yeah.
Well, and even just speaking one more time to all that is just when you have somebody who's wanting to check out your church, chances are they can go online and watch a video and judge for themselves if they want to come in person.
Sure.
They're not going to come.
Yeah.
So you really should have a video on there of both services, however many services you have.
Yeah.
So that way they can see, okay, I like this something.
I guess my main point with that was if you're relying on the internet to do your recording, it's not very reliable. You may want to also be recording on site, if you want to make sure. And the other reason we record on site is if we do have an internet hiccup, now we can take that file and upload it at noon, and we have a copy of it. I've had many times, not a lot of times, but too many for my taste of, the internet went out, but don't worry, immediately after the service or after the program, after the graduation, when the internet went bad, I was able to take that file and upload it, and at least it was there immediately afterward. So what equipment do you need? You need cameras, switchers, some type of playback and graphics, encoders, recorders, and then I'll talk a little bit about testing and engineering. So cameras, and I'm going to go kind of through 3 levels of cameras. Yeah?
Were you dropped 2 names, but did you have some streaming service that you were recommending?
Yes, and I'll talk about it a little bit more later. I really like Boxcast, and I'll talk about it more. And it was really weird because I was looking at that slide saying I never said what I told the 3 I wouldn't use, but I never said what I would use. And I've tried hard to try and make money every time you guys use Boxcast, and it's not working. So I'm not making money from using Boxcast. All right. So webcam. So is that a Mevo? How many are doing like Mevo or just a webcam, or at least at some point did that? No, early on, yeah. Just recently, we just finally transitioned a church from using Mevos to using some PTZ cameras. But so very easy to use, very affordable, very small, but they're not very controllable. I can't. It just shoots what it shoots. It's really meant for a boardroom. Probably poor audio unless you're taking your soundboard and getting it down to a small 3.5 millimeter connector and plugging it in and hoping to get what you get. But they just weren't necessarily meant for this. They're meant for the boardroom, meant for the classroom. Got you by in a pinch. Probably time to move on a little bit. The next is like PTZ cameras. So how many of you are using robotic cameras? Okay. And advantages are small profile, don't need a lot of operators, reasonable cost. What are the disadvantages before I show what I think they are? Anybody have any?
When you have any sort of low end, they get wavy
Oh, really?
in the room, yep.
Oh, you low end audio.
Turn around to the wall, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot like, we mounted on our balcony. Seemed like a good idea until the choir went up there, and it's like an earthquake on the stream.
You can't follow people. If you've got a pastor
Right.
or a friend who's moving around,
Yeah. Yeah.
you can't move, you shouldn't move.
Right. And there's a difference between this camera and this camera is a PTZ, and then also something, Mr. Moto, where it's a guy on a tripod remotely controlling a big camera head, like you'd use for broadcast. I don't know if anybody really doing that in churches right now. This is a little bird dog camera or something like a little small Sony PTZ. It will go right and left, but really I've had a lot of luck with this one tracking. This controller is amazing, but $15,000 for those two pieces. Sometimes they aren't great in low light. They don't have a lot of filters and stuff. They're better for static shots. So when I'm using PTZs, I set up a shot, I take it, I go to the other camera, I set up another shot, I take it, I go back to this camera, set up a shot, take it, but I'm not like, okay, follow him. Okay, now I want you to do a live zoom, pan left, throw your focus while I dissolve out. Not with PTZs, And even like the presets. Presets are not meant to be seen by the audience because that camera takes a ridiculous way. You'd think, just pull out and pan. No, whip, pan, pull out. Now there are some, is anybody using like tracking in their cameras to track the pastor? Okay, so there's some software you can get that will control any camera. Also, BirdDog has recently released tracking as part of their firmware and software. It works okay. If I'm just going to walk back and forth from here, that's good. But if I'm going to run over here and grab something, it loses me, and then the camera flies around, doesn't know where you went. So it works to a degree, but not as well as you'd like it to.
Like
Next.
those,
Yeah.
cameras that people put in the gyms now,
Right.
sports, so it'll track and then when it loses, it comes out or
Right, it's got to find the ball again. Yeah, yep. So ENG cameras. ENG stands for electronic news gathering. It's an older term, but these are your cameras that can record, probably have a video output, and now we can use them in a switcher. The advantage, they have good optics, they have good zoom controls, we operated more fluidly than a PTZ. You have zoom and focus control, so I can probably rack my focus a little bit. I can zoom at different paces. They may have some remote operation capability, and what that means is I have software or hardware where I can be monitoring and adjusting the colors and the irises and the black levels, stuff like that. They have external audio inputs, so you could take your soundboard, plug it into the mic jacks on the camera, and use that to embed the audio and get it out to your stream. I've seen people do that. And what I like about this is I can grab this camera then during the week and use it to go shoot video around campus, and on the weekend it's my live camera, so it can pull double duty. Disadvantages, not as much control as a broadcast camera. I'm guessing there are not a lot of us here who are using broadcast cameras. And I'll show you broadcast after this, and you'll say, yeah, we don't do that. Probably a lot of people are going to get to this level, typically in churches. Some don't have remote operation. Automatic settings may not have desirable results, like focus. It's good, but in low light, it's all over. I go to the manual focus. Like ours had manual focus, but the camera's kind of still fighting it sometimes. lens control may not be as fluid as you want, and your tallies and monitors and comms and stuff aren't built in. So I have to add tallies, I have to add maybe an external monitor, I have to add a comm system to it.
That's what I was going to ask. Can you talk just a little bit more about adding a tally to the end?
Yeah. So so the tally is that light. If your switcher has a way to do tally outputs, so like on a Blackmagic, it's all IP, so it's on the network, and they make a little box that's the GPIO tally box, and it'll take the IP and it'll create it to a multi-pin, and typically, I'm not an engineer per se, but there's a pin in there and it says this is one program, red, one program preview, and this is ground. And what it will do is make a contact between that light and ground. Then you have to engineer a way to figure out how that turns on a light bulb. There are some systems out there, but this is what I learned when I first got into broadcast is, yeah, we don't know, just make it up, figure it out. So I call an engineer and we do punch blocks and we create tallies and stuff like that. It's gotten a little bit better. QB, CUEBI, is a company that makes these little tallies that will just connect to your Wi-Fi, and they'll look at that IP signal, and then you can program them to turn on your lights, and it's all wireless. I probably should have put some more. I'm trying to think. If you were to email me, I can get you a list, because somewhere I have a list of just different tally manufacturers. Metasets is one that we love. Metasets make little boxes that you say, I am using a Roland V60 or I'm using an ATEM, and they'll say, I will get you the box and the cable to make that work. And on the back, I have 8 Cat5 connections, and you wire in the tallies I sell you, and they will turn on the light. So when we make a loom that goes to the camera, we've got an SDI or HDMI cable in it. We've got a Cat5 for tally. We've got a comm cable in it. At least we have those 3. Yeah.
What would you say is the cost of a low-end ENG camera?
Something like this one here, probably $2,500. Yeah, you could get like Handycam. Like when you go to Best Buy and it's like 4K camera. That camera is not the same as a $50,000 4K camera. You know, they are worlds apart. So I would look at. This is one of the Canon XAs. I don't know. We have 25s, but they're up to 55s now or something. I want to say $2,500. Someone correct me if I'm wrong.
And how about G60s? Is that like the low end then?
The which one?
G60?
I'm not familiar with.
1600.
Okay. So, and it's this type of a form factor. Okay. This one's a little bigger now. I don't remember what they're at, like the 605, Canon 605. No, that's a Panasonic. That's a Panasonic CX350, and that is 4 to 5-ish. This is a Panasonic 380, and it's the $8,000 to $10,000 range. What the difference between this camera and these is that this lens is it's a manual focus and zoom, so you can put real zoom controls and focus controls like on a broadcast camera. It has a real broadcast lens on it. Yeah.
What about iris control?
Iris control. So that'll be in the next slide, I think. This one and this one can also have what are called ROPs or RCPs, or remote controllers, which will be on my next slide. This one, you really can't do much about it. You got to tell the camera operator, adjust your iris, or just set it to auto iris. Iris is how bright, okay? I'll talk about that. I'll talk about later. Okay, I have another slide for that. And then in broadcast cameras. So the advantages of broadcast cameras is great optics, interchangeable lenses. So this lens is like a 20x lens, which is about standard on those other cameras I showed you. This is probably like a 76x lens. Like if you want to get the pores on the pastor's face, you know, that's the type of lens. The best thing, does he ever stop talking? These are great in that 370 will use these, and I want to say these run between $1,500 and $2,500 a piece. But this lets me remotely change a whole lot inside that camera. I can change all the colors. I can adjust the black levels. I can adjust the gain. I can change the neutral density filters. I can adjust the iris. If you have, like our cameras have, and we'll see it later, They have star filters and soft edge filters and stuff. I can change that all remotely. So the camera person doesn't have to worry about any of that engineering. They just need to worry about framing a shot. And we have an engineer who takes care of the
Is
rest.
that a remote control?
Yeah, it's a remote control and it runs IP. So I just put this on the network and I tell it which camera on the network it needs to look at. And that little camera, what I love about this, let me see, I'll go back 2 slides. There it is. What I love about these right here, these 350s, is that they will take that same ROP as like a full-size broadcast camera and control a lot of the settings inside of it. So super helpful that the director can just adjust irises. Typically on any of those other cameras, everything's being processed in the camera, it's spitting video down a cable, and then you do something with that cable, with that video. So this is a little bit more a bigger deal. This has a big connection, a fiber connection that goes to it. And on the back of this camera are 2 channels of comms. There's video return. So they have a button and they can see what's on program, what you're broadcasting, which is great for camera operators to see what shot you have, so we don't all have the shot of the drummer. I hit that, oh, director's already on a shot of a drummer. I need to find something else. In one of our venues, it's image magnification, so they can just look up on the screen. The other venue, they have no idea what the director is necessarily taking. They know that I'm not live right now, but I don't know what the other person's getting. So returns are super nice. But then that cable goes to another box in the control room, and in the control room, that actually does all the processing and has all of your video outs and stuff. This, from a cost perspective, like a chain of this camera, like this, the ROP, the cable, the CCU, you're probably looking at $50,000 per camera to do that. Okay. So, like I said, is anybody doing this? I mean, we're not doing this anymore. We had it when we had our stuff, but the church ended up going with the 370 size camera, and we do have ROPs for them, so the directors can control irises remotely in both of our venues. Disadvantages, really expensive. Large, so that camera takes up space in the sanctuary. I am not a fan of PTZs. It's just because I like to be more creative with video. You got to have an operator there. You got to have a tripod. You got to have a space for them. And then may not be as volunteer friendly. There's a lot going on in that camera. There is no such thing as autofocus. It doesn't exist. There is no auto iris. It's manual. You know, it's the difference between Instagram and Photoshop. You know, although nowadays you'd be like, I'd rather do Instagram than Photoshop. Photoshop's way too difficult. So let's just talk really quickly about camera operators in the space, because when you get serious about online, you have to think, are we in the congregation, we are doing worship and they're watching us doing worship, or are we creating a broadcast and we are live studio audience of that TV production? Okay. So when you get to the bigger churches, they've got camera cranes flying around. They've got guys at front of house, and there's flashing lights, and there's a camera guy up there by the drums. Well, they're creating a broadcast, and you're the studio audience watching them create the broadcast. And I'd say before COVID, pastors like, heck no, we are not doing that. And then COVID happened, all of a sudden it's like, there's nobody in this room. We could do some cool stuff. We started doing cool stuff. And people are like, that was great. You know, there's parts that you were able to engage me with. There's things I'd never seen. I'd never seen that really close-up shot of the baptism. That was amazing. And then, why'd you stop doing that? Well, you're back in the room. Can't do that anymore. So now that it's a little more loosening up of, you know, if you want it to look like that again, here's what it took to do that. We had to put some lighting in for that. We had a camera guy up on stage. We had a camera crane to get that shot down on the baby, you know? So it allowed churches to kind of do some proof of concept when no one else is in the room. So just think about that a little bit. And now that people have appreciated the broadcast, they may be less inclined to fight you when you say, we really should put some cameras up, because ever since y'all came back in the room, the people who are watching online aren't getting the same experience anymore. Yeah.
We missed our opportunity to do that one part that you talked about, where you have a person up front with the camera on the shoulder, close shot of the drums. But I think that would be really cool for us to do. But the question would be, how do we get to that point without, I don't want to say ruining our aesthetic,
Yeah.
but I don't want people to notice the camera guy.
Right.
Worshiping.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If you're like in a big arena, very few are even watching the stage. It is a TV show anyway. I think there's two ways to do it. One way is just for everybody to understand that that is part of the online experience, and that's just what we're going to have to deal with. The other way is there a way that we can do, like, put a camera on an automated jib that's just working that shot back and forth as a robotic piece that's sitting there and it's not a person? Or using a Marshall or a GoPro to get that shot and maybe move it a couple times. But I've been looking at like Edelkrone cranes where I can just set this path and it just does this really slowly on the drummer. But every time I go, that's a motion shot. And that's super cool. And nobody will ever pay much attention to that. I just remember going to a church down in Jacksonville. I'm like, you guys have 2 cranes, 2 guys on handhelds, and 4 cameras out in the, like, people put up with this? Yeah, they're just watching us do a broadcast. You know, they're a studio audience. So it's a fine line, but I think you'd probably start with burying some things in robotics. Yep, yeah.
We kind of, when we started to come back, I'm in Oregon, so we still have a lot at home, but we started doing IMAG up on the screen. And what we told the congregation was, this is for the people at home, and for our volunteers, we don't want to have 2 different streams. So we had absolutely no complaints about IMAG, and a lot of, it was all the little church ladies that loved it because they could see what was happening.
The whole thing of like, well, they should be here. Well, you weren't able to be here. And weren't you appreciative that we had spent the money on this technology to be able to do that when you were fighting it before? There was a lot of kind of that posturing going on. David?
One of the cool things about IMAG, we, for confirmation, we used the iPhone, put it on Google, and then put it on screens, and everybody appreciated that. Got to see each confirmand, and because they line up and kneel with the red.
Right.
And so we were able to broadcast that as well as put it up on the screens, and I think that was a good way to use that.
So what David did is they have a system like the CX350s, they're the previous generation, but then he took so you did an iPhone to an Apple TV wirelessly in the Apple TV, and you can get away with that. There's a little more latency and it doesn't look the same, but you realize it's a POV, point of view camera, and people are forgiving on that shot. Like, I'm not going to put a $50,000 camera just to watch the drummer, but if I put a wide-angle fisheye type lens on it, it looks like this cool artsy shot. And I really did it so it's not distracting and it was cheaper, but people will be much more forgiving with that shot.
IMAG is
Image magnification. Yeah, so
whenever your recording goes on the screens up front.
Yep. And we never really needed it in our one venue. We did it. It's kind of a fine line. There's a point where you say we kind of need that. The space is big enough. We did it because we wanted to up a level of production that was really nice when COVID happened. We could just flip the switch, and we'd been doing multi-camera for a long time. Something else I was going to say about that slide and I forgot. So COVID. Need for a switcher. So if you don't know, does anybody not have a video switcher? Do they not know what I'm talking about? Okay. So here we have our cameras, a video camera, a PTZ camera. The PTZ controller is controlling the camera. We have our ProPresenter laptop. And all that is going into a video switcher. And the video switcher is saying, what do I want my audience to see? And that's going out to a video encoder, and that's going to the internet. Very basic diagram, okay? What a step I don't have in here, and this was our, it's really funny because have you guys heard of Data Video as a company? Data Video is like, I wouldn't say low line. They have previously, you're like, okay, it's Data Video, it's not really professional. They met with me, for those of you who were here earlier, I said we were at that big event that we had like thrown all that money into. They met with me that day and like, hey, here's some new PTZ cameras and stuff we've come out with, and we want to bring you on like as a direct dealer. And then I sold so much of that stuff because they had it in stock. It was like this perfect relationship. And this was what we built. This was a $6,000, you're up and streaming with 3 cameras and a switcher. It's all in stock, ready to go. So this was kind of our baseline package. What I would recommend now is that this switcher has an auxiliary bus, and that goes to the screens. So what the auxiliary bus is just kind of another switcher like an aux in a soundboard, but I can say, maybe I don't have dissolves and fancy stuff, but I could just push a button and say, ProPresenter comes in here and it goes out the aux to the screens in the room, because we don't show them the cameras, they're just seeing the screens, but it allows me to have that computer source so I can switch between the computer and the cameras for my stream all in the one switcher. And if there's a baptism happening, I could make the aux bus be this camera, and we could IMAG that portion of the service. Does that make sense? So that's one thing I do is I almost always want to get a switcher with an aux bus so I can give the flexibility down the road, because when I start the conversation, what do you want to do? We just want cameras, those just go to the stream, computers just in the room. Are you ever going to want the camera to be in the room? No, we are never going to want that. You lie. Because the second you have this, your pastor is going to say, can we put that on the screen? Yeah, I got to change the input on the projector. You're going to want that functionality. So I guess it's not a lie if you don't know what it is, but you were wrong. Small format switchers. So how many of you are running a Blackmagic small switcher? Okay. Blackmagic was cranking these out like mad, super inexpensive, great bang for your buck. You probably will soon outgrow it, or it will just stop working one day. ATEM is great, but it is, and I hate to say this, because if you're Behringer X32 lovers, it is like the Behringer of video. I didn't pay a lot. I got all this cool stuff. Look what I can do. Yeah, it crapped out on me. So now I just go buy another one. This is a Roland small 4-channel switcher. Here's another Roland 8-channel, and here's a data video switcher. I believe all these can handle audio, which is great. Not to mix, but to take the audio and video signal, merge them together, and get them into one cable. So that goes to your recorder or your stream. What I don't like about these super small ones is they have HDMI. That's that computer connection. And HDMI is the worst cable ever for video. HDMI wasn't meant to go very long. It was really meant to plug a computer into a monitor. Yeah?
You said you like the Cat 5, Cat 6?
No, I like SDI.
So SDI is the way.
But if you have to do long spaces, you're going to have to convert it. There are people yeah, we have a 100-foot HDMI cable that worked for 5 minutes and then stopped. Because HDMI talks back and forth all the time. And there's licensing stuff involved. Have you heard of HDCP? Where you're why do I have this plugged in but it's not working? That's because you took a Blu-ray player and you wanted to put it on your switcher up to your screen, and your projector didn't pay the licensing, and HDMI is always the source, is talking to the destination saying, "Did you pay your license?" "Yes, I paid my license." "Okay, I'll send you some data." "Are you sure you paid your license?" "Yes, I paid my license." "Okay, I'll send you some more data." "Did you pay your license?" "Haven't heard back from you." Shutting it off. So I'm not a big fan of that format. I don't even know why these companies, I know why they do it, because you have an HDMI on a consumer camcorder and you can plug it in, but going long distances is not great. It's not a locking connector. You can't repair it in the field. Someone trips on that cable and you break it. Now what do I do? Now I've got to rerun the whole cable. If it was a long one, you're kind of hosed. So what you were saying is you convert it to a Cat 5 or something, run it down, then it converts it back to HDMI, which is a great way to do it. Anytime you have those converters, it's just a point of failure, and you've got all these converters needing power all over the place. If I'm doing long runs like that, I tend to go SDI. And SDI is just a coax cable with what's called a BNC connector. Same cable that you had on your cable TV screen in the back, but we have what's called a BNC locking connector on it. And it just says, you send me video, I ship it that way. I don't care if it's on the other end, I'll just spit video out the back side. So it's super rock solid. If you get into that, make sure you know what cable you're getting. A 50 ohm antenna cable is not the same as a 75 ohm 3G. If you're going 4K, you have to buy a little bit better cable. So I have loved the Roland switchers. They are affordable. They have a lot of different ones. They handle the audio well. They have great apps built in. They keep getting better every time. This one kind of has the soft buttons, a lot like the Blackmagic. This one has real buttons that really feel real and are really a T-bar. And that T-bar is for dissolving from one camera to the other. And when I'm doing dissolves, I tend to not use the audio button. I kind of ramp into it and ramp down. And I want to feel that shot, and I can adjust the speed. So that comes back from my old days of doing video, but I love the T-bar right there. Disadvantages, limited inputs, limited effects. It really just cuts and dissolves video. Do we ever use wipes? No, we never use wipes. So if you see this switch that says, you can do star wipes and falling sheep. Yeah, you never do it. You dissolve or you cut. That's it. All the rest is garbage. Okay, mid-format switchers. What? Huh? It's horrible. I do have one client who would say, if you can do a star wipe, and just in his show, throw a star wipe. Also, never use Comic Sans. I'm glad somebody got it. There will be a song at the National Youth Gathering this year where I'm going to use Comic Sans just for Mark Kiesling because he thinks it's a great font. So I will put one, and all of you who see it will know that that's Mark Kiesling's doing. Mid-format switchers, so more flexibility. This is a newer Roland V160. I think it has 8 SDI and HDMI. It can be either. It has 2 downstream keyers. 2 keyers and 1 downstream keyer that can also be picture-in-pictures. This one's around $5,000. Okay, the audio can come in. Has a great audio app for mixing. Has aux buses. This is the Carbonite Black Solo. And that one comes in a few different flavors. Either this where you plug in all the cables in the back, or it has where this is just a Cat5 connection to the processor in your rack. So all your connections are buried. You don't have to worry about if I move this, is something gonna pop out. This one, you're probably looking in the $10,000 to $13,000 range. They have a 9-input version and a 13-input version. This is like a bigger level ATEM switcher. With the way ATEM does it, if you're familiar with Blackmagic ATEM, is you buy the switcher box and then you can add on the control surface. The control surfaces are beautiful. They're also very proud of them. Like, that's the most expensive piece that Blackmagic makes. But for me, I don't like to switch with software. I want to have a surface. If you want to use Blackmagic, and I should have written this down, and you don't want to buy their surface, Skarhoj, Skarhooj, Polish company, and they make all sorts of hardware pieces. Or if you want to do it on the cheap, you get a Stream Deck. I don't know if you've seen Elgato Stream Deck, and you get a free software called Companion, and you can route all those buttons and map the buttons to control the switcher. This one down here, unfortunately, I don't see any much anymore. That's a Panasonic 550. Panasonic is rock solid. You're probably looking again at, depending on what cards you put in it, $10,000 to $12,000, $13,000 for that. Okay. This one, I believe there are like 8 or 9 on board, and then you can add more SDI cards. I believe you can do a shift on this to add a second row. And you can get DVI cards and HDMI cards and SDI cards. But we used to install a lot of these, and all of a sudden it's just, I don't know what Panasonic did. They just kind of stopped pushing their switchers. I almost forgot about it for a while. So I don't know how. Does someone else do you have a question? Okay. All right. And then disadvantages, lack of macros, potentially. Macros are, if I do this keystroke, it does all these functions. So for instance, you can do some macros in this guy, a little bit here, a lot of macros here. The advantage of Ross is like a broadcast switcher production company. So if you know how to use this, you could walk into the ESPN production truck and work their switcher. You know how it works. It has a whole software suite that goes with it where you can program, the board. What I don't like about it, it has a lot of programming, but you really need to program it all out beforehand. It's kind of hard to program on the fly. So before the show, you have to know what you're doing and create all your stuff, write all your macros. But with a macro, like we use this one, so like at David's church, there's a start macro. And when you hit start, it sets up all the keyers, it puts on the right buttons in the right way. We can set up a default setup. We have another church where using the Stream Deck, we can have they wanted 2 computers to be downstream keyers, but this only allows one chroma key. Whoops, I hit the wrong button there. This only allows one chroma key. So we have a macro, and you hit that, it switches the input to a different input, it analyzes the chroma key, it adjusts all the settings, and makes it a keyer. Then when I hit the other one, it switches the other input, it analyzes all the green, sets up all the settings, and makes it able to key. So you can write all those macros in there. When you get to broadcast, people use macros all the time. So lack of MEs. So MEs are other mix engines inside of the switcher. And I'll show you how we do ours, and we use multiple MEs, and just show you some of the flexibility there. And then lack of multiple layers or broadcast effects. They're really just meant to cut video still. Large format switchers, you have a lot of flexibility, more inputs and outputs, multiple MEs. For instance, this is just this ROS, this controller will work with that other one's processor. It's just a bigger surface, more buttons you can push, more ways you can make mistakes, right? This is a little 4A switcher. 4A's been doing better, but I put them in the large format. Disadvantage is they're expensive and they're intimidating for volunteers. It's just like when you had a little soundboard or someone sat down like next to an Allen & Hayes GL4800 and they're like, what are all these buttons? It's just the same thing replicated over and over and over and over and over again. This is just channels replicated over and over, and this strip replicated 4 times. So it doesn't need to be intimidating. And then you have Enterprise, and that's the one I want to be running, but I don't have it. So,
Star Wars.
Right? Yeah, and you feel like that when you're like, yeah, thrusters.
So does that have a T-bar for every ME?
That had T-bar for every ME. Yep. Any other questions on switchers before we move to encoders? All right. Software encoders. Here's just some different options here. OBS. How many of you are using OBS? All right. Good? Yes. All right, great. OBS is software. It allows you to do a little bit of switching. It's actually some really great software. Yeah, that's what you're using as a switcher. So you can have some input cards on there, and you can do some rudimentary switching. It also has some great layering and keying things that you can do. I hear some people like it can be a little clunky to switch on. It's not really meant to be a switcher. It's meant to be an encoder. OBS is also great for ripping stuff off the web because you can just screen cap it. How dare you? You can just screen capture it and get rid of all laws. Not that any of you should ever do that. Wirecast is another one that's been around for a long time. It's expensive. Similar to OBS in that you can switch and stuff. It's just been around before OBS. And OBS has really worked their pants off during COVID because all of a sudden everybody was using it. So there's a lot of updates there.
Is OBS more, it's not as expensive as Wirecast?
No, it's like free. Yeah. But with free comes your support is, hey nerds on Facebook, what do you think I should do? Whereas OBS, you're like, I paid $800, $1,500, or Wirecast, I paid for this, and a guy will answer the phone.
So if you're in Wirecast, are there any advantages to going the other way to OBS, or if you're paying for Wirecast, keep paying for it?
I have let my Wirecast lapse.
Okay, that's all I need to know.
Yeah. I also prefer hardware over software in general.
Sure.
But I don't think I would need Wirecast with OBS. Okay. That's my opinion right now. Yeah,
with OBS, as I said, we tried OBS to go straight to YouTube, and it wasn't exactly a new computer, but what exactly is kind of the baseline, hardware support that software requires?
I'm the wrong guy to ask because I'll never recommend what the baseline is. Okay. I'll recommend what's the best computer you can possibly put on there.
You really want to go with like a gaming computer.
Yeah.
So you do need some dedicated
GPU.
Yep. Yeah.
I don't know if it was my situation, but I tried OBS pretty early on in COVID, and I had nothing but frustration with my Mac computer, which wasn't the newest of the new, but it was still playing ball. And I just couldn't get my audio input to work ever, for any reason. And we had to very recently buy a gaming, a disgusting Windows computer to get the job done.
Yeah.
But I think the cost of computers and good computers going nowadays, it was worth it to have a dedicated.
Yep. And that's the last one on here is ProPresenter, which built an encoder. Stupidest thing they could have done. ProPresenter already takes more resources than it needs. And for people to say, oh, now you can not only do your graphics, but you can also bring in your inputs and switch it and have it broadcast from ProPresenter. People are like, why isn't this working on my Mac Mini? Come on, that was so, I mean, those guys kick themselves more often than any company I know by adding stuff in there, and then people think they should actually be able to use it, I run multiple ProPresenter machines for different things. So this one is just doing the playout. This one maybe has some inputs. This one could be doing an encoder, but it doesn't all work, and especially because you're talking about a company that's, so NewTek. Are any of you familiar with NewTek? They did the toaster, TriCaster. They, for a long time, were like, we are software, and it'll just run on your computer. Until they realized the types of computers people were trying to run it on, and then they had to rain down on their hardware. So they're still trying to support the church that says, what is the cheapest computer I can possibly run this on and get all this stuff? And they need to say you can't. Here are the two computers it runs on. Buy those. They'll support those after that. And I think these guys would be really smart to just sell you a hardware box that they have control of. So don't use it as your encoder. That's my 2 cents. Next is hardware encoders. Here's just a few examples. We use these little data video NVSs because they're super simple. We set up our stream key in them. The director comes in, he holds down stream, he can hold down record and record on a little disc here, and it just starts spitting out video. Not a lot of features to it, really easy. Yeah.
Now, what's that, in contrast to OBS, what's that kind of do?
This is just doing encoding. It's not doing any switching. So you plug your video in, it's sending it to the internet. About $500. Your audio is going to be embedded into the video signal, so it doesn't. Don't believe this one has external XLR.
The one we have has not XLR, it has like RCA.
It has an RCA, okay.
It's better.
Yeah.
If I understand what OBS is doing, is taking your input for your camera, taking input from your audio, putting it into the appropriate bitrate size, and putting it in a codec.
Yep.
And sending it out.
This does the exact same thing. It doesn't do some of the advanced features of OBS like switching and screen capture.
What OBS is doing is my computer's processor is making all that happen, and that has its own brain.
Yep. And it only does that, and it has been designed to do just that.
So how do you hook that up to? Do you need OBS to run that?
Nope. So I come out of my video switcher directly into this guy, collect it to the internet.
I have a USB 3.0 from a PTZ optics.
Yeah.
And an audio board.
Okay, so if I was doing like that, I would be looking at probably this guy, an Epiphan, okay, $500, $1,000, $1,500, roughly. Okay, so because this one I believe will let you use USB sources. Otherwise, you need to get your USB source to something like HDMI or SDI. If that's the situation you're in, software encoder is probably the best way to go. That makes the most sense to me.
Does that need to talk to a computer at all?
It has a web interface, so if I need to change any settings, I just get on the web and type in the IP address, and I can configure it. Once it's configured, don't touch it again.
What's the advantage?
The advantage is I don't have to have a computer there that's running nasty Windows and could crash. It's really optimized to do that one thing, so I expect it to do that one thing. Because it's some dedicated hardware, sometimes it does a better job of encoding. Whereas your computer, let's say your computer does something weird and now it's using resources and pulling that away from the encoder. So I think you get more steady results. I'm always personally a person who likes, I'm always someone who likes hardware where it was designed to do that one thing. Yeah. So it'll get the job done. OBS will get the same job done.
But if I set like, if a service starts at 9:30, I want it to go live
Okay.
at 9:25, does that have to all just be automated, or is there?
So we do that on the Boxcast end or Facebook end or YouTube end. This just spits video up there. As far as when that server turns it on to the public, that's scheduled on that side.
You can program some of them to do
Some of them you can, yeah. Right, like live stream creates a channel, and as soon as I spit video up there, it turns it on. Boxcast says you can send me all video all day, but until you tell me to spit it out, so that's like Boxcasts, they have their own little encoders, and they just plug into the internet, and they are encoding and running all the time, just spitting up video constantly. Yeah.
We're using Switchboard Live.
Uh-huh.
To then send it all to everything. It's the same thing. Until you hit go live.
Right.
All those things.
Yeah. You had something back here, John.
Is that AJ Hilo, is that the same kind of?
And I've heard Hilo more at this conference than I've ever heard Hilo before. And last time I could probably put a Hilo in there to satisfy people who keep talking about Hilo. Same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. This one and this one can both, I'm not sure about this one. This one can connect Wi-Fi. You can also add cellular. So if you're somewhere and you need to add 4G or something on there, it can broadcast cellular. This one can do a little bit more switching. And if you get into their larger versions, they have even more switching capability inside.
Did you say all of those also combine audio, or you have to do the audio before it ever gets to that?
This, come on. This one we're saying has some RCA audio. This one has XLR audio in the back, and I believe this one may have an adapter to do XLR audio into it. I will typically let the switcher combine the audio and video into the HDMI or SDI. And the reason I do that is because the switcher is usually already allowing for its latency to get things to time align again. Whereas this, the video comes in at one time, the audio comes in another time. It's putting them together, but one could be ahead of the other, and they may not have delays to make that adjustment. So I will typically embed at the switcher or somewhere before, or even on an audio embedder, which takes your video signal in, your audio signal in, converts it to one signal, because oftentimes those will allow you to set some delay in them. Yeah. Okay, the next part is on testing and engineering, and probably a lot of you know nothing about this stuff. Does anybody know about vector scopes and waveforms? You've probably seen these bars before and be like, that's cool, but I have no idea what it means. And a lot of this, in the analog days, we worried about this more, but it is something that's good to know. So this is a vector scope, and this is a waveform. And the vector scope shows you the different colors. So I don't remember off the top of my head. This is reds up here. And you could see red, magenta, blue, green, cyan, green, and yellow. And when you see, it's looking at, there's the green, and it's coming off of my camera, should be going right in, green, right in that green dot. And if it's not, somewhere my colors are getting shifted, manipulated. So back in the day, you would take a video camera, you'd go out in the field, and you'd stripe the tape. You'd put bars on it, bars and tone. And then you'd shoot your video. You do that with all your tapes, and you'd come into the post-production, you put a tape in the deck, you'd take the bars, and you'd adjust with a proc amplifier and make sure all of these were in the right spot. And then you start editing. And then you take that tape out of deck A, if you ever heard of A-B editing. And then later the client would say, hey, that cut, I want to change that. And you'd go back, you put the tape in, but now the colors didn't line up right. And when I cut to it, I saw this beautiful shot and one not so good. So I use these color bars to line up and adjust the color so that they were always consistent on all my tapes when I come back and edit. Nowadays, we really don't use that as much because we probably just don't care, because the computers are so good and we do so much color correction anyway. But how I use this now is we have a chart with this, and I'll show you the chart, and it's stupid expensive for a poster. But I take all my cameras, I shoot the colors, and then I adjust each camera to go into this dial, and now I know all those cameras are color aligned exactly the same. So how many times have you had like, that camera looks great and that one looks bad, and they're both the same camera? Well, someone's probably messed with some settings. In that ROP that I was showing you, that's what you use to adjust the colors so that you can get all your cameras to look the same. They call this making the meatball. So we did some training with Panasonic, and he's talking about you go over and over and over with something that's called a color matrix, and I'm getting deep into this. But to make that as perfect as possible so that when you white balance the cameras, they'll still be in perfect color alignment. Okay. And one thing, if you ever get into this, the blues, don't hit the blue button. Blue, you got to come in a little bit for blue. Red used to always bleed in the standard def, and now blue does this thing called blooming. I don't know if you've ever shot blue on your stage, and it's like this weird, bright, lasery type of look. I mean, HD does not handle blue very well, so usually we pull the blues out a little bit. This down here is called a waveform, and this you would use much more in live production. This is showing luminance or brightness values from black up to white. Okay, and this way it's showing color. So the gray right here is right there. This dark blue is down here. This yellow is right here. This white bar is all the way up here. So you can kind of see it's like looking down at the colors and the brightness. When I'm doing irises, there's a mark that's 100 here. I don't want to go over 100 with the brightest whites. Okay. Stuff today will mostly handle it, but older projectors, if they get too much white in them, they'll just shut off. They can't handle it. Right now we're working with a broadcaster in central Nebraska, and their over-the-air transmitter keeps shutting off because they're making their white levels too bright, and it can't handle it. It's like a signal overload. So I'm always watching this and saying, are my broadcast colors good? I can be watching it on a monitor, and if my monitor's turned up really bright, it may look good to me, but then I realize what we're actually sending is really low and it's really dark. So I will do a lot of watching this to make sure I'm actually within spec of broadcast. Yeah.
So the TV that we have, the screen that's in front of us is an LG.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't get it to adjust down. It shows it too bright always. And so I'm always telling my directors, don't look at the TV, look at the waveform.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing you use this for is adjusting a monitor itself. So you put the color bars on, and then there's something called a blue mode. When you hit blue, it makes all these black and blue, and you can adjust settings to make sure that your monitor is showing you a good representation of what's actually going on. The problem is if it's not a broadcast monitor, it doesn't have the right settings to adjust to make it look right anyway. Most of us are using monitors as a reference for is someone in the shot, not are all the colors great. Yeah.
So how do you watch that, I guess?
Yeah, so a few ways to do it. There is some software that you can get it, almost all the stuff is paid. Probably the most inexpensive way to do it is like a Blackmagic Smart Scope. And it's a panel that you have two different scopes, and you could have one be a vector scope and one a waveform. Or I'll usually do one as a waveform and one as audio analysis, so I can look at my audio meters. We'll talk about that. We gotta get cruising. That's the one I'd probably recommend. Yeah. And here is again, this is bars over here, but this is a live situation. And I put a note last night. Talk about lighting here. This is probably a little bit low. This is a little bit high. Okay, now it's just crushing all those whites up on the top. I've got to bring it down. That's within range, but I'd probably push that up a little bit. And this is my camera left to right, black to white. Okay. So I want to talk about lighting really quick because the cameras can't see the definition, the depth like your eye can. So when you got into cameras, all of a sudden you're like, that's great that Pastor's wearing that black shirt, but he really blends into the black drape behind him and he looks like a floating head. So when we're doing video, we want to make sure we backlight people to get that white on their shoulders to give us some type of depth, or put some uplights behind them so that somehow it's creating more depth in the shot. The other thing I'll talk about lighting is your color temperature. So cameras need to know what color temperature it is. And if you have orange lights, you know, the warmer color, maybe it's 2800 Kelvin or 3200 Kelvin, and your camera is looking for 5600, which is a bluer light, your colors are going to look horrible. So pretty well every camera, except for those, you know, cheapy conference cameras, are going to have a white level, or sorry, a white balance. You take a white card. I usually just use a big piece of foam core, turn on your lights as they're going to be in the service, put it right where the pastor is going to be standing, shine all your cameras on it, and hit that white balance button. And it'll usually tell you this is what we're reading the light as, and it'll do a great job of color balancing your cameras. So if you're not white balancing, that's like the most basic thing to do. Yeah.
If you have different lighting scenarios throughout the service, do you then
Redo my lighting.
redo your lighting?
Yeah.
You prep it for each shot?
Yeah. So if you do mixed lights, so back when LED was starting to come in, you'd have lighting rigs where it was half par cans and half LED. When they switch on the LED, the director would say, okay, switch to outdoor lighting. We'd switch it to 56K. And then they'd do this warm, okay, switch to indoor lighting, and we'd have these multiple presets, and we were constantly white balancing the cameras back and forth. If you have mixed lighting, you probably need to pick a color temperature and stick with it. So there are light meters like photographers use, and you'd stand up there and hit, you know, take a snapshot. Okay, I'm at 4400 here. Move across the stage. Oh, I'm at 56. Why don't you warm those lights up a little bit? If you're using LEDs, you can adjust the color temperature. And I think we've settled on about 4400 is about where we're at. But yeah, you can't just throw a light and then the camera is like, it looks to my eye like it's blue, but it's registering as purple, because the camera doesn't know what white actually is in this space.
Is it similar strategy for managing color change over time instead of over geographical position?
Phrase that differently.
Well, you're talking about like in this spot in the sanctuary, in this spot in the sanctuary. What if it changes?
If you're using the same color temperature, and that's about our white levels, the colors aren't going to make that much of a difference. So I can go to a blue. It's not like I need to rebalance the cameras because I want to see blue. Do something crazy, like make your stage a crazy color and hit white balance and just see what the camera does when it thinks the blue is actually white. The biggest thing is the initial white color temperature. After that, when you change colors, you should be fine. Yeah. Okay. This is that card I was telling you about, and it shows black levels, but this is like a $2,000 poster. And we were doing this training, like, okay, so like now let's put your poster up there, your cam line. I'm like, I'm glad I just happened to have one of these here. And then we're adjusting. He's like, I think your poster might be expired. And there's an expiration date somewhere on here because they assume that over time, as light has hit it, it has. Now we keep ours in a $500 case for our $2,000 poster so that it stays in the dark all the time. Stupid money. But they're the only guys that make it, and they sell you like one. So that's why they get so much money for it.
Just take a picture of yours and use it.
Yeah, it'll look awful, but I couldn't believe he's like, it may be a little off. It's about 6 months older than it should be. Oh, come on. What a racket. And I haven't found stuff much cheaper, but okay, let's talk about audio. We are running out of time. 3 ways of doing audio. House mix. I should put another one on top of there, which is just ambient microphone in the room. A house mix, an aux or matrix, and a broadcast console. How many of you are doing just a mic in the room? Okay, how many of you are doing just right off the soundboard? Okay, how's it sounding? Like, I'm talking not an aux. I'm talking about mains out.
Not super.
Okay, all right. And how many of you are doing an actual broadcast board? Okay. All right, so house mix is we just take the outputs on the console and we plug it in, and whatever we're mixing in the house, that's what's going out to broadcast. Okay? Simple and easy, except we didn't mix the drums into the house because they're already too dang loud, but there's none of them on the broadcast, you know. So it's easy, probably better than an ambient mic, although not really. Sometimes an ambient mic is probably better, except for the pastor's voice for picking up the band. You have problems with gain structure. A lot of churches, like, they run their soundboards and like you see a couple green here and that's loud enough for the room. Broadcast needs to be tapping this yellow every once in a while. So if you're just spitting out that little audio signal, like, it sounds great in the room, and the people online are like, why is it so quiet? So if you're doing that, you need to go to your amplifiers in the room, turn them down so I can turn this up a little bit. if this is the way you're doing your audio. I always tell people the first thing you do is it's got to be the top of the green, hitting yellow every once in a while, so I have a little bit of room. When I get to red, I get distortion. Okay, so I can't have that. Yeah.
Is there a way to kind of universally measure what a person's computer is receiving when it comes to sound? Because like I put when I'm testing it, I put my computer like midway volume, and I want it to be audible. But I feel like that's such a moving target in terms of
No, the way to do it is to watch these meters in your broadcast. So watch on OBS, and is it hitting yellow every once in a while? Yeah. Then you're sending, and after that, there's not much I can do about it. Some people watch on an iPhone, some people watch on surround sound, some people are watching in their cars. You know, there's no way we can control that.
Speaking.
Yeah.
When you do that, because everyone's computer is different, listen to a video that you know is really, really well done, not by you, and then yours. So pick, if it's going to be mid-volume, listen to yours, and listen to Elevation Church, or listen to a hilarious YouTube clip made by Sony or something like and see the comparison is more important almost than the absolute.
That's great. That's great. Okay. We're going to cruise this because I do want to get to some directing techniques. Disadvantages, yeah, the gain structure. It's not meant for broadcast. You can't hear the acoustic instruments. It was mixed for the room. The room is very forgiving. And how many times have you heard, the room is great, and then we didn't realize that she is way more pitchy than we thought because the room forgave that stuff, and or he is pitchy. The next would be an aux or a matrix mix, and this is basically you're using your aux bus in your console, so you get a separate mix. Probably the easiest way to do this is have an iPad, and they are controlling the broadcast audio. And the main guy up front isn't having to worry about it, although he could very well put on headphones, dial that down on the aux, but you're splitting his time, and it's not going to be as good if the front of house guy has to do it. We will often use a matrix and an aux, and I will typically, a matrix is like another mixer, but I can take my mains, put it into my matrix, take some auxes, put them into my matrix. What I do is say, get your mains there, that's half the challenge, and now bring up some auxes to fill in those things you can't hear, like the drums. But at least the mains has reverb and some Q on it, whether you like it or not. But it gets you 60% of the way there. Okay? I don't want to go into the details of this because that's what that guy is for. All right. Can be hard to manage. Like I said, may not be in stereo too. You're dealing with mono aux buses. Now you don't have a stereo field for your broadcast. The best way to do it is to do some type of a broadcast split. So either if you're on an analog board, you have like a split snake. All your instruments plug in here. One goes to the front of house board, one goes to your broadcast board, or more often today, we're doing some type of a digital split. So on our console, we're using Dante or some other technology, taking a Cat5, it sends everything to the broadcast room, and they remix it. What we've done is we've created, this board can either be the broadcast person gets every channel, and they can completely do it however they want, or Paul has set up a number of groups, 5 or 6 groups, like we have the drums and we have the electrics and we have the vocals and we have the pastor and we have videos. And those are mixed at front of house, and then we can kind of adjust those a little bit in broadcast we don't have the broadcast engineer here today, but the video director has 5 that he can probably manipulate and make it sound a little bit better. Okay? This is so huge that we're able to do this. And like a board like if you had, I'm a big fan of Allen and Heath right now. This is like a $3,000 board for broadcast. Put like an $800, I don't know what the Dante cards cost, inside there, and now you can do a full broadcast mix. Downside is you need more people. I am a fan of more people doing fewer things, but like, it's so easy to find volunteers, right? And good volunteers. Also, broadcast, I've seen so many places where they put their best guy in the house and like their B guy on broadcast. Put your A guy on broadcast. The room's forgiving. It covers a multitude of sins. Put your guy who loves being in the studio, put him on the broadcast, who's going to be constantly tinkering and making everything sound great. Production team, most basic, a director, a playback person, audio person, and camera operators, depending on your system. Ideal, In the real world, you have a director, and that's the person who's telling which cameras should be on, a technical director who's pushing the buttons, a producer who's in the room talking about what's coming up next, talking you through the whole service, camera operators, a playback or CG person, an audio front of house person, a broadcast person, an engineer, streaming utility person who's making sure everything's working, because when the internet stops, I can't stop directing to go fix the internet. Someone needs to keep directing. So have a utility person who's around just to fix all the stuff.
Pastor.
Huh?
He's called pastor.
Yeah, who is also switching and mixing. I had a guy, and I'm sorry if this is one of your churches, he said, I want to do everything from the pulpit. I will switch, I will do the audio mixing, I will do everything. This is a horrible idea. Nope, I can do everything from an iPad while I'm preaching. It's going to be awful. I don't have time to talk about other things there, but I'm going to guess none of you are here, like really here. Most churches aren't. Very few are. We're not here. Too many people. But in the real world, if you want to say this is our best shot at everything going well, that's kind of your personnel structure, Yeah.
My congregation is very small, and most people can't even open their emails.
Mm-hmm.
How do you recommend a person who would volunteer to learn, be trained,
Right.
on the equipment, when everybody, where can we send them in an approval way? How does a person go from zero
To hero. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff online. There are some churches that are putting out, here's our behind the scenes of how to do this. You could find a local director in your area who, maybe directs for a news station or from a bigger church. Hey, can you come over and help our people, teach them how to do some of this stuff? That would be a great way of doing it. Lots of practice. So here I have 2 or 3 directors. I don't want a bunch of directors. Maybe 1 or 2 people who can really hone in this craft. And I have some different numbers here. You don't want to burn people out, but you also want to put them on once every 6 weeks, and they have to relearn how to direct all the time. In the key positions, fewer people doing a great job getting a lot of practice. Okay, so that's about how deep we go with our people.
I have a suggestion for you too. If you have a community college in your area,
Mm-hmm.
with an audio program, those college students will feel
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
We found a lot more accessibility came when we moved to some hardware and some software.
Yeah.
We run everything on a computer.
right. I've also found the more professional your stuff is, the more good people are happy to help and do it. When someone's like, I'm going to be running garbage, it's going to look like garbage, I'm not interested. Oh, you guys are serious about this? Well, I'll help you out. Huh? Yeah. Okay, some camera techniques. Because I got fly really bad now. So rule of thirds. Here's your third line here, third line here, third here, third here. Keep your subject on the thirds. Eyes are on the horizontal third. He's over here on the this vertical third. What this does is when I dissolve or cut to another shot of someone over here, they're filling that negative space rather than everybody in the center and their eyes in the center, so they have a bunch of headroom on the top. You want the 2 shots to complement each other. That's where having that return channel is great. So if I'm a camera operator, I see that they've got this singer framed on the right side, so I'm going to frame my next person on the left side. Okay? So that once you try to get your cameras into rule of thirds, that's great. Camera commands. Everybody calls everything a pan. Pan right, pan up, pan down, pan forward, pan back. It's not that. Here's the camera movements. Dolly forward, you boom or jib up and down, you truck right and left, you pan right and left, you tilt up and down, and then you Dutch or roll, right or left or clockwise, counterclockwise.
We just need pan and tilt.
We just do pan and tilt, yes, in Zoom. But have your camera people know this stuff and have your directors use the same vernacular. So one person doesn't say, pan up. Pan up, that's not even a thing, Get all your directors, get your camera operators all understanding whatever the lingo is going to be. We'll use zoom in or push in. Zoom out, pull out, so we'll use some interchangeably. But directing techniques, think ahead, think ahead, think ahead. There's this one director who says, Phil, how are you have so many shots? I'm like, because I'm thinking about a shot 2 ahead of what's on the screen right now, and he's always reacting. Oh, there's a guitar solo. Someone find the guitar. I knew a long time ago there was a guitar solo coming up, and I already had a camera ready to go on that. Okay, so you always got to be thinking ahead. Plan or test your shots. I keep hitting the wrong button. Plan or test your shots. So The first year we did confirmation. We set up the kneeler, and then they went up and were like, all we see is the backs of the confirmands. We need to change this next time around. So if there's anything different you're doing, hey, if we're going to show that, but the guitar stand is in the shot of camera 1, and camera 1's what we're going to need. Who's going to move that stand? Okay? Because during the live thing isn't when you want to learn those things. So check your spots. Create and use the negative space with the rule of thirds. Keep the pace with the tempo of the action. Slow song, I'm using dissolves. And I'll tell people I'm on slow dissolves now. Fast song, I'm using cuts. I'm keeping pace, and I'm a drummer, so I'm always 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm cutting where the snare hit is, you know? And I'm either cutting once a measure or once every other measure, but I kind of try and set a pace for myself, okay? Always use your preview and program buses. So don't, if you know what this is, you have a bottom row that's preview. That's the shot that's coming up next, and then I hit cut or dissolve and put it to program. Don't punch on program, because even in that split second, you could hit camera 2 and whoop, that's not the one I wanted. You know, a lot of mistakes are made when you're just hot punching and your fingers go to the wrong spot. Now you just shot some random camera whip pan. So use those buses. Again, think ahead. And then always leave yourself an out. So we have a camera in the back of the room that is a wide shot of the room. And I've had shows where a guy has a button, it's the OS button, if you know what that means. And he hits the OS button and that goes to the wide shot, because something went wrong and I've got something to go to. Your out could be the graphic of the day that's stored as a still store. Always give yourself something so that when all your people go on the same shot and there's something happening and the pastor comes in and I can't move him around, I can just go to a wide shot really quick. Okay? Sometimes I have to create myself an out. You stay there for a while because I may need you if I mess this up. If you have a camera, anybody have a camera crane? Didn't think so. Great, because that guy just floats around the whole time and I can just always cut to him and he's always got something beautiful and amazing. So I had the Tower of Hanoi thing on there. I won't get into that. This is what, when COVID first started, this is what we were seeing as a director. So here's our cameras. Here's what ProPresenter stage monitor is showing me. Here's ProPresenter. Here's this background. Here's another multi-view that we were giving to the audio guy. The audio guy gets a multi-viewer so he can see, oh, there's a guitar playing. They're on this side. That's guitar 2. He can see a little bit what's going on. This was a Twitter feed coming in because we were taking tweets from our online audience and putting them up on the screen. So that's what I see as a director. This is what's in preview, and this is what's in program. This is where those MEs come in. So this is a layer, this is a layer, and this is a layer. And this is a mix effect bus put into a picture-in-picture so I can switch this inside this bigger composition. Okay, so this is probably program is all this put together. This is an ME, this is an ME inside of another ME, so I can float those windows around. So it gets a little confusing after a while, but that's the stuff you can put together if you have multiple MEs on your switcher.
You're running that with one tech pushing all those buttons.
Yeah. This was a TriCaster with the big surface with the 4 MEs on it. Yeah. So like something like for the youth gathering, we'll have multiple MEs going to all different screens. So we have 4 screens we're controlling. So MEs will be dedicated to different screens and stuff. You're talking about Boxcast. This is Boxcast interface. As a director, I have this on and I'm monitoring the bit rate and the frame rate going out. Where this dipped, it's because we're probably on a graphic. Graphic doesn't need as much bandwidth. But it's telling me that we're going out at 7.3 meg per second. Here's how many people are watching, what our frame rate is. I'm monitoring that through the whole event. This
Web browser?
Yeah, it's in a web browser for Boxcast. This is our viewer engagement, showing how many people are online and how long they were online, stuff like that.
And it's free?
No, Boxcast is not free. Starts about $50 a month. Okay. This is kind of the last part I'm going to show you. And if you guys got to go, take off. But this is just a directing example I want to show you of the behind the scenes of what I'm doing when I'm directing. If you really want to hear Waymaker, right? This was because of COVID. We didn't have our graphics set up to do lower thirds, so we had to do this picture-in-picture thing.
Going to 3.
Thanks.
We get anything out too? Do we have some? There we go.
So that was the engineer adjusting the iris for me. So either I'm doing that or I'm saying I need more iris on 4, I need less iris on 2.
A little bit 2, bring up 4.
Here's that jib shot. So he's just able to float around and get me beautiful shots all the time.
Stand by 1. We're just waiting for one bit.
The camera guys, I always put them in standby. I'm going to be coming to you soon. And then I'll say when they're live. There's those star filters on the lights. There I just told him to start over. I said, I want you on a wider shot. I saw what you're doing. Start it over again.
Go on to 3.
And then that's what's happening in program there. So those guys earlier were talking about like those keyboard shots and the drum shots. You know, just a static camera on those.
Stand by 1. Go on to 1.
So you guys do anything NDI?
What?
NDI at all?
Yes.
Stand by 2.
I use it more in a pinch than I rely on it. Because you have to have really good